Welcome not to your dream world, but to your harsh reality. Enjoy it. A black Mercedes slowly pulled up in front of the entrance to the Imperial restaurant. Behind the tinted windows, it was impossible to recognize the occupants of the luxurious car. The driver, dressed in white gloves, quickly opened the back door. First to exit was a woman wearing a beautiful beige suit designed by a famous designer. Her black hair was perfectly curly, and a real pearl necklace shone around her neck. Behind her was a man wearing a perfectly cut dark suit, and behind him, on the other side of the glass door, was a boy of about 7 years old, wearing a small, classic tuxedo. Elena Petrovna nervously adjusted her red dress and checked her watch once again. Her 60th birthday was being celebrated exactly as she had imagined, surrounded by successful relatives and influential friends. To her right, her two eldest sons, Dmitri and Nikolai, were showing off their expensive watches, discussing their latest transaction. Their wives, dressed in fashionable attire, were engaged in lively conversation with other guests. Will they finally come? Elena Petrovna thought with some trepidation, her eyes falling on the empty seats at a table not far away. She had sent the invitation to her youngest son with curiosity and a touch of cruel sarcasm. 8 years ago, Andrei had left home after she had publicly called his wife an ignorant peasant who could never be part of the family. At the time, she had thought it was only fair. Marina was nothing more than a simple, uneducated, and unambitious girl from a remote village. Mom, was it really necessary to invite them? Dmitri muttered, leaning toward her. Let's not spoil such a wonderful evening. Elena Petrovna tried to smile. She was amazed to see what they had become after all these years. He was sure Andrei would still be unloading baskets at some warehouse, and his wife would still be selling jewelry at the market. He thought it would be amusing to watch at that moment. A handsome couple with their child entered the room. The maitre d' waiter respectfully led them to the table reserved for the Vokops. Elena Petrovna watched them intently, as if they had stepped off the cover of a luxury magazine. The man helped the woman sit down, settled the child, and only then sat down himself. The little boy behaved perfectly. He neither screamed nor ran. He simply placed a book on the table and immersed himself in reading. The woman, with a graceful gesture, took off her light jacket, revealing her beautiful, jeweled hands, and began talking to her husband in a low voice. There was no admiration in her eyes, only jealousy. Svetlana remarked. There was not a question in his voice, but an intrigue, a web being woven between Nicholas and me. Elena Petrovna simply shrugged before turning to the guest who had come to congratulate her. Not even a few minutes had passed when the handsome man stood up and walked towards their table. There was something strangely familiar in his gait that Elena felt, though she couldn't quite recognize him. "Good night, mother," the stranger said, stopping beside her chair. Elena Petrovna jerked her head up. That voice had been coming for 8 years, but she recognized it. She fixed her eyes on the man's face and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The same brown eyes, the same expression on his lips, only now surrounded by a flawless hairstyle and a confidence that completely enveloped him. Andrei whispered in disbelief. "Yes, mother, I am," he replied calmly. "And I've come to congratulate you on your anniversary." Silence fell over the table. Dmitri and Nikolai stared at her as if they'd seen a ghost. Their wives stood motionless, their cutlery suspended in the air. The rest of the guests, out of their sight, fell silent. Is it really you?" Elena Petrovna stammered. Before her stood a man whose grace and elegance surpassed any of her older sons. His perfectly tailored suit seemed tailor-made for his success. A watch more expensive than Dmitri's own car glittered on his wrist. His body radiated confidence and self-assurance. "Yes, mother. And allow me to introduce you to your wife." Andrei extended his hand to the woman approaching the table. Elena looked at him and was stunned. The immaculate girl had completely disappeared in the cheap dress. In her place was a true lady with impeccable makeup, a sophisticated hairstyle, and a posture so dignified that many present wanted to imitate her. "Good evening, Elena Petrovna," Marina greeted in a low but firm voice. There was no trace of shyness or pleading, only a hint of courtesy. "Mother Marina, the hostess stammered, unsure of what to say. "And this is our son, Pavel," Andrei said, calling the little boy. The boy approached, bowed gracefully, and said simply, "Good evening, Grandma. Happy birthday." His pronunciation was perfect, his manners unflattering. It was clear from a glance that the boy had received the best education and training. Andrei didn't recognize him. "Old man, you've changed," he said in a tone that betrayed surprise and a touch of envy. "Life changes people," Andrei replied, sitting down next to his family. "Especially when you have a true inspiration." "And what do you do?" Nikolai couldn't contain his curiosity. Marina gave him a quiet smile. "We have a network of plastic surgery clinics in 3 cities. Andres is the chief surgeon and owner, and I handle the administrative work." "Clinic," Dimitri's wife repeated incredulously, and Andrei calmly clarified. "We started 8 years ago with a small office. It was difficult at first, but gradually the results came. Now we have about 100 employees." Elena Petrovna remained silent, trying to absorb what she had heard. Her youngest son, whom she had always considered a failure, turned out to be more successful than all the others combined. Dimitri was barely a middle manager at a bank, Nikolai had a modest position in the market, and Andrei owned a network of clinics. "But where did you get the money to open these?" she finally asked incredulously. "I didn't just finish my medical studies, I lived it up every single night. And then I didn't specialize in plastic surgery, but I wrote my own destiny with my own hands," Andrei explained. "I worked in a hospital, saved as much as I could, and took out loans." Meanwhile, Marina earned a degree in economics and an MBA. "It was a hard road, and I thought they worked in the market," Elena Petrovna said softly. "It was like that in the beginning," Marina confirmed. "While Andrei was studying, I sold goods in the market and then worked as a cleaner at the hospital where he was doing his residency. That's why we know how to value hard work and money." There was no resentment in his words, just an acceptance of the truth. That calmness, more than any reproach, hurt Elena Petrovna. She had thought a broken couple would beg for forgiveness and help, but before her sat a strong, contented family that needed nothing. "Our son Pavel studies in a private school, learning English and French, as well as music," Andrei said, stroking the boy's hair. "During the holidays, we usually travel around Europe. Next year, we're planning to take him to America." Around them, people at other tables watched them silently. Many recognized the restaurant's famous, wealthy customers, about whom stories had circulated. No one believed they were Elena Petrovna's relatives. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell us about your brother?" Dimitri's grandson, barely 7 years old, asked softly. "And you never told us about my cousin either." A deep silence fell over the table. Pavel looked up from his book and stared at Artem, without saying anything. It was clear he understood the situation and didn't want to make a fuss. "We had differences," Elena Petrovna finally replied. "What differences?" Artem insisted innocently. Andrei smiled affectionately. "Sometimes adults can't agree, but that doesn't mean children can't be friends." He took out a business card with the clinic's logo and handed it to him. "Whenever you want to come visit us. So, here's the address. We have a big house with a swimming pool. Pavel would love to show you his robot collection." Elena Petrovna's heart sank. Andrei had not only achieved success, but he had also been generous and kind. He hadn't tried to humiliate her or take revenge, even bonding with his nephew, whom he barely knew. "We should go," Marina said, standing up. "We don't want to disrupt the celebration." "Wait," Elena Petrovna interrupted firmly. Everyone turned to her. "I want to apologize," she said tearfully. Andrei and Marina looked at each other. "Why?" she asked calmly. "Because of what I said then, that you'd never be able to do anything, Marina. You're not right for our family." "I was wrong." "Yes, that's what you said." Andrei nodded without any malice. "But, we're grateful." "Grateful," she repeated, surprised. "If they had supported us, we might have stayed here without realizing our true potential," Marina explained. Pain forced us to become stronger and more independent. We create our own lives, Andrei continued, and that's more valuable than any acceptance. Elena Petrovna understood that her apology wasn't enough. A lot had happened since then, and her blessing was no longer needed. Andrei had created his own family, his own company, his own world. Maybe we could see each other from time to time, she suggested timidly. Andrei looked at his wife, then at his son. Pavel nodded. It was clear he wanted to meet his uncles and his cousin. Perhaps Andrei agreed cautiously, but on equal terms, without any preaching or judgment. We're not the people we were 8 years ago, and we don't ever think of being that way again, Marina concluded firmly. Elena Petrovna bowed her head. She understood there would be no second attempt. She would either accept them as they were or lose them forever. Okay? She whispered. On equal terms. Andrei extended his hand. It wasn't a hug or a kiss, but a formal handshake between two friends.
Goodbye, Mom.
Thank you for the invitation. The family headed out. Reaching the door, Pavel turned and waved to Artem. The two children smiled at each other. Perhaps a new chapter was being added to the family's history. Elena Petrovna watched them say goodbye, a bitter lump in her throat. 8 years ago, she had lost her son to arrogance and prejudice. Now she had a chance to get him back, but under equally different rules, without any contempt or condemnation. The red lights of the luxury car disappeared into the darkness of the street. When she returned to the guests, the party had ceased to mean anything. It had not been ruined, but changed. He had learned that true success was not measured by money or status, but by the ability to maintain humanity and dignity in every situation. And in this regard, his youngest son was much richer than the others. Thank you for listening to the end. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe and like the channel so you don't miss the next ones. I want to apologize, she said tearfully. Andrei and Marina looked at each other. Why? Marina asked calmly. What I said then, that you'll never be able to do anything, that Marina isn't right for our family, I was wrong. Yes, that's what you said. Andrei nodded without any malice. But you know, we're grateful, she continued. Grateful? Marina repeated in surprise. If he had supported us, we might not have stopped here before realizing our true potential. Pain forced us to become strong and independent. We create our own lives, Andrei added. That's more valuable than any acceptance. Elena Petrovna understood that his apology wasn't enough. Too much had happened, and his blessing was no longer needed. Andrei had created his own family, his own company, his own world. Maybe we could visit each other from time to time, he suggested timidly. Andrei looked at his wife, then at his son. Pavel nodded. It was clear he wanted to meet his uncles and cousins. Andrei agreed cautiously, but on equal terms, without any preaching or judgment. They were no longer the people they had been 8 years ago. Marina concluded firmly. Elena Petrovna bowed her head. She understood there would be no second attempt. Either they accept them as they are now, or lose them forever. Okay, she whispered. On equal terms. Andrei extended his hand. It wasn't a hug or a kiss, but a formal handshake between two comrades. Goodbye, Mom. Thank you for the invitation. The family walked out. Reaching the door, Pavel turned and waved to Artem. The two children smiled at each other. Perhaps a new chapter in the family's history was beginning. Elena Petrovna watched them say goodbye, a lump of bitterness in her throat. 8 years ago, she had lost her son to arrogance and prejudice. Now she had the chance to get him back, but under equally different rules, without contempt or condemnation. The luxury car with the red light disappeared into the darkness of the street. When she returned to the guests, the party had meant nothing. She wasn't ruined, but transformed. She had learned that true success isn't measured by money or status, but by the ability to maintain humanity and dignity under all circumstances. And in this respect, her youngest son was far richer than the others. Thank you for listening to the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and like the channel so you don't miss the next ones.